Hey there, and welcome to Season 4 of Stories Unveiled, the podcast where we believe every story has the power to inspire, connect, and transform. Whether it's through the mundane moments or the life-altering tragedies, we highlight God's story on display in our lives. Each episode, our guests get real and dive into their own personal journey. Here is where we hold hardship in one hand and hope in the other, while we explore who Jesus is in the messy middle. I'm Ashley Sears. I'm so glad you're here. Hey, it's Ashley here at Stories Unveiled. Before we dive into this episode, I want to personally invite you to our upcoming annual Fall Women's Conference. This is your chance to experience the power of real, life-changing stories, just like the ones here on every episode, brought to life in person. Join us for a full day of hope, inspiration, and connection, featuring incredible regional and local speakers and a moving keynote session, plus amazing uplifting worship. Connect with amazing community partners and browse our curated vendor booths. Don't miss this opportunity to gather, grow, and be encouraged by stories of hope at this fall's Stories Unveiled conference. Register now at storiesunveiledconference.com. We can't wait to see you there. Vicki Greenfield is the church group's advisor for Pure Desire Ministries. She has walked her own betrayal journey and has so much wisdom to share around the topic of sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. Vicki is a wife and mom to 2 adult children with 3 beautiful grandbabies, and I am so thankful that she is here with me to share her insight. Thanks for being here, Vicki.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm glad you asked me.
Yeah. So in 2008, you and your husband, that was a pivotal time where you guys actually started to receive some very real help for some significant betrayal that had happened in your guys' marriage. Will you tell me about that journey?
Yeah. So 2008, the pivotal point you just said was actually a nuclear bomb in my life.
Oh, gosh.
Just thought I'd tell you.
Yeah, okay. So your life blew up in 2008.
Blew up big time, yeah. So it really, I'd have to go back to, we were high school sweethearts, best friends, and I was raised in a home. My mom was a believer. I was, I don't remember not knowing Jesus.
Okay.
Baptized at 9. And a part of our dating life was going to church together. I went to a Baptist church in my town, and he went to a Baptist church in his, so we dated by going to, a church together, and so there really weren't any red flags, but the addiction was already there, which is very common. Probably at least 90% of people that have a porn or sex addiction has developed from some sort of childhood trauma, and then it ramps up usually during puberty or adolescence, and then it becomes pretty full-blown as they become young men. Or women can have it too, but this, I'm talking about my relationship, so men.
Yeah.
So, from the beginning, there wasn't a lot of intimacy in our marriage, not the sexual kind, but the emotional kind.
Yeah, connection.
Not a lot of connection. I didn't see a lot of intimacy in my own home, and so I didn't know any better. John thought he was doing better than his parents did. We all think we're doing just a little better.
We all try.
Yeah, we all try. But there were some things that were occurring over the years that were very upsetting to me. But my brain couldn't go to he was an addict, or that he was looking at porn, or he was. I was very naive, I think. Yeah. I hear women say that. And I'm like, well, it's natural to trust. You should be able to trust your partner, Yeah. And so it's not naive so much as they learn to be deceptive from a very early age, too, when they have an addiction. So there was just a lot of stuff that was happening. I remember telling John one time there was a family life conference. I'm like, we need to go to this, because I thought, well, something's got to, change. And he's like, he didn't want to go, dragging his feet. And I finally said, well, it's cheaper than a divorce. And never used that word before, And so he's like, okay. So we went, and just like everything that I tried, and I tried everything, and I read all the books, and did all the things.
To help save him.
To help our relationship.
Okay.
I did not know still.
Yeah.
At the 20-year mark is when I really found out from a family member who saw him coming out of a strip bar. I have his permission to talk about it, but that there was a secret life.
Yeah.
Now we kind of call it a secret sexual basement when, in the jargon. But so he dug this great basement under our home that nobody knew about but him.
Yeah.
But yet we all were dealing with the fallout of his attention being elsewhere most of the time, even as a dad. He was a good dad when he was emotionally available, which wasn't, because his passion was his addiction. Yeah. So and hiding it. So at the 20-year mark, we went to our pastor. God bless him. He sent us to what he thought was he was a biblical counselor, and nothing against biblical counselors, but he basically told John to read his Bible and pray more and confess and stop it. And he told me that I needed to be more sexually available, which was telling me that I had a part in his behavior. So we didn't know any better. There wasn't out there what there is now with the ministry that we're in and several other ministries that are really good now to help people. But we really plugged along for 10 more years. I can't believe it. Yeah. Me being more available. And I thought he was trying. I thought we had it down. I mean, the intimacy part didn't change. We hadn't really gone to really good counseling to help work on that. Just this one particular counselor who shall remain nameless. But so at the 10-year mark, I realized that the behavior was still continuing. Yeah. And so that was 30 years into the marriage.
How long have you guys been married?
We've been married 48 years.
That's amazing.
I know I don't look that old.
You don't.
So at the 30-year mark, we went back to the same pastor. This is the difference in 10 years can make. Yeah. He then sent us to a CSAT, which is a certified sexual addiction therapist, who was a Christian. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. What has even come out in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So this was like 17, years ago. Yeah. And we went to this CSAT, and he told John he had to take a bunch of tests, told him he was an addict, sex addict, and John cried. He just broke down and cried.
Like he didn't know, or he didn't ever want to?
No, who knows, if you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't take drugs, who would think you're an addict? Yeah. I mean, in that time. Nowadays, I think it's more out there,
more widely talked about.
Possibility, to be addicted to porn or sex. So, backstory: I have an oldest daughter. At 24, her husband died in a plane crash, and his brother and dad all died too. I think that's kind of a turning point for John's acting out behaviors when they became worse. Yeah. But I didn't know that at the time. These are things I found out in hindsight. Yeah, as we do. Anyway, 4 years after the plane crash, my daughter was engaged to get married. That's when the nuclear bomb went off in our marriage. So I had 4 months. I had to figure out, what I was going to do about our living situation, because what I found out was that it wasn't just porn, there were other people involved. And I thought I was leaving. I really did. We found this good CSAT, that's a sexual addiction therapist. But I told him, I don't think I can stay, but I do need help, obviously. So will you help me too? And so for 4 months, I stayed in the house because we didn't want our oldest daughter to know that we were about ready to split up.
Yeah, it was her wedding season,
her wedding,
right?
And that girl, she's a beautiful girl, had gone through so much with a plane crash and losing, I think we did a lot of grief work during that plane crash. That grief work actually really carried me through the marriage crash, too, So anyway, she got married, and John was doing all the things. When you really seriously want recovery, men or women, there's a lot of time investment and just personal investment you have to make. A lot of people would like to think that, and I believe that God can do miracles. Yeah. I believe that if you ask him to change you, he can do it right then. But I also have seen and believed more strongly that he wants you to put some skin in the game.
Yeah.
And he wants to see you invest in your own recovery, including me from what had happened. And so that's what John was doing. So, it was only 4 months, and I was not convinced to stay, but I also wasn't convinced to go anymore. So I just was really honest. I said, I don't know if I want to stay married to you. I don't think so, but I'm willing to wait and see. And John said, I will save myself for you. And at the time I thought, you were supposed to be doing that to start with.
You're like, wait a minute. I thought that's what
that
was
wasn't real
supposed to be
impressive.
happening.
Didn't mean a lot at the time. And I look back now, and I understand
You're
a lot
the
more.
sentiment was there.
Well, I understand a lot more about addiction.
Yes.
Too, now. So he basically, we were abstinent from any sexual behaviors for 2 years.
Yeah.
Him included.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we did a podcast for Pure Desire, and he said 2 years, so many days, and so many hours. He was just joking. But he probably did.
Like he had it all figured out, because to an addict, that's important.
Well, yeah, but he was a very much recovered addict by the time.
I know that, but that's the joke, right? That's
yes, it is. He runs groups for men, so he knows how they, how they feel about it. So at the 2 year mark, God was really changing my heart. I spent a lot of time being really mad at John.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
Yeah.
Just broken.
I hear that.
Broken, hurt, mad, angry. The counselor said to me one day, "Do you think contempt's a sin?" And I was like contemptuous of the counselor when he said that.
You're like, let me think about that.
Well, I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, well, you spent 2 years now, and are you going to stay or are you going to go? And what's that going to look like for how you're, dealing with, your pain, I guess we should say. I don't know if that's exact words, but I went home and I was really mad. And I looked up contempt in the dictionary. It means you think you're better than someone else. And by golly, I did. I thought I was a lot better than him. I didn't think I'd ever do that to anyone. I didn't even think I had the capability, although I know we're all sinful, our nature, But so God just said to me, basically, we need to work on your heart. Not to stay with John, but to just, what do you want out of life? How do you want to move forward from this? After 2 years of, I see younger women that just get the hang of that a lot sooner than I did, but I spent 2 years. I went to the counselor finally, and I said, I think I'm ready to stay in the marriage, but it's got to look different. It's got to look healthier. Our sexual life has to be healthier. Everything's got to change. And I know that's a lot that has to change in my heart and about me. So that's where we worked for a while. And we put the marriage back together. And at about 5 years later, in the church we were in, we were, and maybe the people that are listening know, when you go through something tough and you actually come out the other side and you're stronger, you are not going to get away with God not putting somebody in your path that's having the same issues, And then you have to make a choice. Are we going to try to walk beside them? Am I going to pretend like I don't want to tell them about this because it's embarrassing, Am I going to, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah, now I have this. What am I going to do with this?
What am I going to do with it? And then, we were in the Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of do a loop here. And John, they want you to do a testimony, John wanted to do his testimony, and I was just, this is, back, we were in the beginning stages of recovery.
Okay.
I'm like, no, somebody will know what's going on with us. We own a business in the valley. We're this, we're that. And John's like, if someone's here, they're here because they need to be in Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah.
And so, because I don't care. He said, if I can help someone, if I can tell someone what God's doing in my life, then I'm going to. And so I kind of sat out like this, while he was doing it. And believe it or not, now it's just so weird because, if someone comes up to me in a restaurant, the waitress, and says something, I'll tell her all about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So things have changed a lot. But anyway, we went to our pastor at the church, back to the story, and told him that we would, we didn't know what we could do, but we could maybe walk beside a couple if they were going through this.
Help mentor or something.
And he didn't really want to hear it.
Really?
No, it's not the pastor that's at our church now.
Yeah.
That pastor that's at the church now is, all he loves Pure Desire. But
yeah.
So we just felt really kind of like we were out there, found out in a roundabout way after we'd been in recovery about Pure Desire. We both joined groups, and they're long groups. You know, the men's groups are like a year and a half, 2 years sometimes if they do all the things.
Yeah.
And my group was almost a year and a half. Shouldn't be, but it was.
Yeah.
And we went through the groups to make sure we liked it, and we loved it. And so we just like, okay, we're going to do it. You know, back to the pastors, back to the deacons. Can we put this in our church? So they had the big meeting, and they said, well, we don't want to own this as a ministry, but you can have it as like an outreach ministry, and you can use a room or two.
Yeah.
You know. So that's kind of how we got started doing the Pure Desire stuff.
Yeah. I know full well. It's hard because, you know, it's easy to look at pastors that are like, I don't want to have anything to do with this, and just get. And, you know, I've been in a place where I've been so mad because I'm like, do you not know like what? And I've had to learn how to grow compassion for those leaders in the church that tell you to pray harder, read your Bible more, do all of those things, because they just don't know.
Right.
They just don't know the implications and the damage that causes, and how.
I would like to think they just don't know, but I think there's a few that do. But
well,
that's another podcast probably.
We could have several podcasts. But it's just so hard because the church needs this. Yeah. Everybody needs to know about this specific, like you had said, you're not an alcoholic, you're not a drug addict, you're not something that is to the world an addict.
No.
And so it's really easy to conceal. It's really easy to function. You go to work, you hold a job, you do all of these things. Meanwhile, you're literally dying inside and your marriage is falling apart. And even if you're not married, people still struggle with this and it still eats them, you know, alive. It's weird. I was talking to a pastor of a local church here, and he said, what's so crazy to me is that nowadays pornography is so wildly talked about, and whether it's acceptable or not in whatever circle you run in, you know, it's so wildly talked about, almost that of alcohol and drugs and all of those things. Why, when a leader or somebody, we'll even just say anybody in the church, why when they go to their pastor and say, I'm struggling with this, is it not accepted like alcoholism and saying, what can we do to help you?
Right.
How can we walk alongside
There's
you?
There's an ick factor to sex addiction.
There is. Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. There's an ick factor.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I guess shameless plug, but I'm on the board of Pure Desire, and you work as the church.
Yeah, I don't work for money.
No, you're a volunteer.
They interviewed me as if I were getting a high-powered job, I'll tell you. But yeah, I've been doing this for a long time now. It's a very important job, Vicki. Well, I'd be doing what I'm doing whether I was a church group advisor or not.
Right.
It's just our ministry. God's driving the car, you know?
Yes. Absolutely.
Until he decides to, stop it, we're on board.
Yeah, and Pure Desire is just doing some amazing things. And
they are.
And in Pure Desire, they helped work with the Barna group.
Yes, I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah, the Barna group. And so the report that just came out, fall of 24, the report that just came out had some staggering, unfortunate statistics.
Not surprising to any of us working with people in this area.
That's
not
correct.
Surprising. There's not anything in there surprising.
Was it 58%? Is that what it was?
No, it was closer to 68%.
68%
of men in the church that have viewed porn. And a high percentage of them didn't feel that it was wrong.
Yeah.
About the same percentage didn't feel that viewing porn was wrong as out in secular world.
Yeah, that's wild.
And then women, it's gone up to almost 40%.
Yeah.
Pastors were at 58%, which is really scary.
Pastors, that's what it was. That's what was staggering to me, is that more than half of the pastors in the United States owned it for these statistics, but are secretly viewing porn or...
But, it's really not terribly surprising to us because, Pure Desire groups that we run, he runs the 7 pillars like Ashler and Johnny.
Yeah.
And I do the Betrayal and Beyond. They're all Christian they're all Christians.
Yeah.
I've done 16 groups now, because I was doing 2 a year.
Yeah.
I've slowed down. I'm getting old.
It's a lot.
And there's no one. I think I've had 3 women in my groups that were not believers, and they still thrived in the groups because the information is so valuable and life changing that we get in the groups. But yeah, they're already believers. A lot of them are high up in their churches. A lot of them are hired. They're employed by their churches. This touches everyone. This isn't just somebody slinking around in a trench coat problem.
No,
because it's touching everyone, including a lot of women. And thank goodness they have a great program for women out there now too, called Unraveled.
Yes,
it's hard to find a group in this area.
It is,
but anytime you can't find one of these groups, you can go online, which probably should remind people or plug it that puredesire.org. Yes. All you have to do is go on to their website.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
So people can go there, puredesire.org.
Yes, you can find groups, you can find counseling if you can't find it here.
Yep.
And that was another thing I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, availability of counseling too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I would love to just zoom out and talk like bigger picture anyway, so you can address counseling, but there is an epidemic of porn and sex addiction, which, that isn't just I look at porn and I act out, or sex addiction. I go to brothels if they're legal where you live, or strip clubs, or fill in the blank. That's often, and I know for so many stories, that porn is where it starts, right? There are smaller things, and then you look at porn, and then it grows and grows, and that oftentimes leads to infidelity, like real life engaging with another human.
It's like in our situation.
Yes, infidelity, and it just keeps going, right? And it just keeps progressing, and so. Having affairs is all lumped into to all of that, and so we know that the statistics are high. They don't lie, and there's something very real that not only we as just people need to deal with, but the church needs to deal with in a huge way. Yep. And so I'd love to just talk about what do what recommendations do you have for someone caught in addiction, that type of addiction, or somebody who's experienced betrayal? I can't tell you how many times I've had a woman tell me, because I don't lead Betrayal and Beyond, but I do help women and walk with women through things while my husband does lead 7 Pillars. I can't tell you how many times I've had a woman say oh, this is their problem, not mine. And I was one of those. Women. But then also are just they just don't know what to do. They just are so now what?
Betrayal trauma is real.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
When a woman does say to me, this is their problem, I try to help them understand that you have a huge grief process ahead of you, whether you stay or go. And that depends usually on whether he decides to
put in the work.
Recovery and put in the work. And I do mean put in the work. But yeah, so when someone calls me, usually originally, I suggest strongly, if someone didn't know I was doing Betrayal and Beyond, let's start there. I would suggest that they go online and try to find someone in their area that they could talk to, first of all. And there's other ministries, there's Be Broken, I think, and there's several others out there, but I love Pure Desire. I think it really covers all our bases really well. So, of course...
And they offer counseling, professional
counseling. They offer these same groups that we do for free. They offer them online if you're in an area where you can't get to a group. You do have to pay for it.
Yes.
But I usually suggest that they first get contact there. If someone first makes contact with me, we meet. I just try to make sure that they're safe. Because sometimes these situations are not just abusive financially or spiritually or emotionally. They can be abusive physically sometimes. And so I kind of try to establish safety, where that's at with them. Try to give them some good resources to help them feel more stable. Because most women that discover this think they're crazy. Because the husbands are so good at being deceptive that there's a term we use called gaslighting, that I was gaslit for 30 years. I mean, I look back at it now.
I wasn't gaslit quite that long, but Yes.
I thought gaslighting was just, I didn't know what the term, and I just thought, everything I tried to bring up was my fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was good at turning it back on me to protect his secrets,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's when a woman can hear me even say what I just said to you, she starts to feel validated, and maybe I'm not crazy, and maybe there is something going on here that I need to get help for. And what we try to encourage women to do, and what I try to encourage them, is you can't fix or change anyone else. God can do that, but He won't do it if they don't want to.
Yeah.
Usually, anyway.
Yeah.
But you can heal yourself. So, let's put your feet on that path. Let's put your feet on figuring out, what do you need to feel safe? Usually women in the situation I was in, and probably you were in, we didn't even know what a boundary was.
No.
We hadn't set boundaries. If we did, we were probably told that boundaries are manipulative. You shouldn't be doing that in your marriage,
Yeah.
So we have to teach what healthy boundaries look like, so that they can kind of develop a safety plan in their head for how they're going to stay in the marriage and what they need to be watching for, or if they need to leave.
Yeah.
So it's a process.
It is.
And it takes time. And what we do a lot in our groups is safety stabilization, talk about what health looks like in his behavior and in your own. A lot of women don't know very much about self-care.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I just heard a woman in my Bible study talking about self-care was selfish. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, listen, I just had 13 women in here last night, and we're working on what is self-care, because they have no clue.
Yeah.
They need to be able to feel good about themselves again, feel healthy, clear out their minds a little bit,
Well, and even depending on how far you want to take that back, self-care it's a fundamental, even biblical principle of
it's stewardship.
We have to get poured into. We have to do things that fill our cup, that do things for us, so we can pour out to others.
Steward your body, steward your spiritual life.
Yeah.
God
there's nothing
wants us
selfish
to do that.
Yeah. Well,
so getting them in these groups is just and there's something I don't know how to even explain how the Holy Spirit works when you're in community. But we provide a safe place. Nothing's said outside that group. My basic saying is, if you want to talk about what you've learned here, great. Don't talk about what you've learned about me here. So we got this safe place for women to share, and it's not a husband bashing session, but we do have to talk about what we've been through. And we work through this program of grieving. Grief cycle includes anger, if you know what the grief cycle is. So we need to work through that, and we don't come out perfectly fine, but boy, in a year, there's so much healing, and it's all done in community. And I'm the facilitator. I'm not the teacher. The Holy Spirit's the teacher. And boy, when you get a grip on that, you can just watch God just really work.
Well, it's amazing because our pastor always says, and I'm sure he didn't coin it, but he says, you're often hurt in community, so you have to heal in community.
Yes, I've heard that. Yes, and I agree.
Yeah. And so it's like, you can't do this by yourself. We weren't meant to walk alone in our journeys anyways. We can't heal alone. And I know so many people that are like, well, it's just me and God. It's just me and God. And while that is so important to have God be in the center of all of it, you've got to have people, whether it's for accountability on one side, or it's for I'm struggling. I need somebody tangibly to walk alongside me.
Yeah, there's a Bible verse, confess your sins to one another and pray for each other so that you can be healed. It doesn't say so you'll be saved. He's saying you need to share your life with someone for your own healing. Well,
I know that's where Asher and I got, which is why Stories Unveiled even started, is just the simple fact that it's we got to a point, like you said, John was like, I want to share my testimony. And you were like, I don't think so. But my husband and I got to a point in our journey where it was like, okay, well, we can either keep this here close to our vest, or we can share it with whoever will listen, or whoever God puts on our path to hopefully maybe help somebody, because we cannot be the only people dealing with this. And we know now, especially with all the statistics, that we're not. And so it's our our job, I feel like, as believers, even to say, like, this is what I've walked through. But look where God has been in the midst, and also look what God can do when you partner with him to like really find healing, and then the redemption that can take place in that.
And the blessings that come with joining what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's just, it's staggering. Someone asked me one time, one of the gals, how do you sleep at night when you hear these stories? I'm like, I sleep good.
Yeah.
I have a front row seat to watching God work. And yeah, it's hard. And I can't say that I used to say it doesn't affect me, but I know it does.
Yeah.
Because it's part of my story too, so it affects that part of my spirit. But that also makes me an empathetic witness. Yeah. Which, if we hadn't had that experience, we could be present.
Yes.
The empathetic witness part would not be nearly as strong.
No.
So, and that reminds me too, I was going to bring up, when you're trying to find a group or somebody that's safe, that's kind of a scary step. And you do have to be careful, because there are people out there, even in your group of friends, that you will find that probably aren't safe.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that the women in my groups grieve, that they've found that their circle of friends has shrunk a bit because they had to look for the people in their lives that were safe with their story and their husband's story. Because our husbands, even though they have an addiction, and it's heartbreaking what's happening to us, God loves them just as much as he loves me, and he wants to see him heal and be healthy just as much as he wants to see me heal and be healthy. And John isn't just his addiction. No. John is so much more than that, Yeah. Sometimes we start looking at ourselves like, oh, I'm a betrayed, traumatized, broken wife.
To play the victim.
He's just this awful addict, They perpetrated all this stuff on me. Yeah. But, that's another part of growing, is learning that, he's God's and I'm God's, and God's got a plan for us. Yeah. And these groups, some people will say, well, we don't like the secular part, but the clinical research in these groups is what really helps. And then just the leaning on God and redefining who we are in Christ, which is really big in the both of our men's and women's groups. It's that's the healing touch, it's what we need. Yeah. But
I know in my journey, I used to, and I don't know if this is the actual phrase, but I used to offer like premature forgiveness. I don't know if that's like actually what, But so like in my own recovery and healing journey from betrayal, it's also like, I didn't realize how much it was like, you just offer forgiveness. Because as a Christian, we have to forgive.
Yes, we do.
And so it's like, okay, but what I realized as I got far into my own healing journey, that it was like, I never forgave. Every time I forgave, I never actually forgave.
Every group I've got, I've had at least one woman that said, I told my husband I forgave him, and after working on this, I got to go back and say, I don't forgive you yet, but I'm working on it,
Premature forgiveness is a real thing. Yeah. And it's so hard. I'd love to hear your perspective a little bit. It's so hard because as believers, we are called to forgive because Christ first forgave us, and we are no better. Right? Like we still have our own sins, we still fall short and all of those things. And it's so hard to forgive somebody who has continued to hurt you. And sometimes, in some cases, will continue to hurt you. And, I love that you addressed if a marriage survives, because not all marriages do.
Yeah, this is a Christian program, but we also recognize that it takes two people to be in a marriage, a healthy marriage. Yeah. And if one person chooses to not be healthy, then the other person has to choose what he or she needs to be safe. Yeah. And so that's the learning curve here. But as far as the forgiveness piece, they talk in our book, it's like a year-long, book. Yeah. They talk early about forgiveness, but it's about, let's think about, this is what we're going to work towards. It's not like, okay, do that now and then we'll move on. Yeah. But I could have, if Johnny had decided he didn't want to change, let's say, or if he gave up on himself, I would have left. I knew I would have. I thought I was leaving anyway.
Right.
But God didn't tell me I had to reconcile with him. the picture that I've had is if a snake bites you, and the snake doesn't get help for being a biter. Then you don't have to expose yourself to the snake anymore. If you need to feel safe, you need to move yourself into a place of safety, and that may be away from the snake for good. Or at least away from the snake till you can see that and that's probably not a good analogy of snake, but you can see some change. And, so the groups are Christian. Yes, we want marriages to make it, and we know they can. But it takes two. So if the partner has chosen the addiction, because sometimes they just feel so helpless and so hopeless that they don't think they can do it, and so they give up. Then the other partner needs to be able to move on or move into a place of safety. Some women stay married, but basically we ask, how will you feel safe? If you choose to stay married, we never tell someone to stay or go. That's a personal decision. The only time I've ever told a woman to go is when she was actually being physically hurt. There was violence against her. I've told her to leave the house and get a protection order and help a couple of them do it. But that doesn't happen. The abusive factor is more emotional, spiritual, financial, sexual, not physical in what we deal with. And there's a lot of abusive, it's called a pornified style of living, or pornified style of viewing life. I can't remember how exactly they put it, where they can be pretty abusive in a lot of areas and not even realize it because of that. So, you need to get safe. And you don't have to reconcile with someone that's abusive.
And I love that because I just feel like it gives freedom in being able to work on yourself, get healing, and growing up in a Christian home and just always being told that divorce was never an option. Although I did see divorce play out, it still was one of those, it's not God's plan, and God doesn't want divorce, and He hates divorce. And I know pastors that have used divorce as it's a really bad word, and while all of those things are true, it isn't God's design, it isn't His plan, but neither is addiction.
I was just thinking that.
But neither is pornography, neither is...
Or abuse.
Or abuse. None of that is God's plan either. And so here we are in a fallen world with so much garbage that what do you do with that? And for somebody, I won't even say a woman, because a man, we know statistically now that there are women that really struggle, that... you don't have to feel stuck, that there is freedom.
Yes. But back to the forgiveness thing, what I like about our program, too, is forgiveness is worked through as a grief, part of your grief cycle. Because you have to know what you're forgiving. Even if your partner is doing all the right things, like John did, you have to know what you're forgiving, or it's going to come back. I think one of my most frustrating things as a younger woman was going to women's retreats and having them say, just give it to God. Just give it to God. And so I would, give it to God. And then 3 weeks later, after I came down off the mountain from the retreat, it was back. It's like, oh, God, I'm doing something wrong, I had no idea that giving it to God was a process. And actually someone could explain to me how to do that, I just thought it was a saying that I had to figure out on my own. So giving it to God, processing your grief, your hurts, what you've lost, is so healing. And that can lead to complete forgiveness, My heart is soft towards my husband, but there's a scar there. It's not going to go away, but it's a clean scar. We cleaned it out. The surgeon cleaned it out.
And
but
it
took a lot of work.
Well, and that's something I always advise people, women from the stage at Stories Unveiled, but I have men and women on the podcast, but just people in general that are sharing their stories, I highly advise and walk alongside them to share from a place of a scar rather than an open wound, just because of so much that we learn in the process of coming out of something terrible.
A place of an open wound is no place to start sharing with someone.
Because you're still wounded, you're still hurt, and you need the triage, right? You need the help. You can't really effectively help somebody else if you're bleeding, And so, but I fully I feel that. I have such compassion for my husband too. I have a very soft heart for my husband. And I remember the moment in my healing journey. He was way ahead of me in his healing
I remember that
journey.
That happened to me.
Yeah. He found Pure Desire. Well, I actually found Pure Desire, but he started going on his own, and he started finding freedom and healing and really what it looked like to dig deep and to do some of the hard work. And I was like, great, now we'll be fine. And it was like, whoa, I actually have so much of my own stuff. Yeah. And so when I started digging in and I realized wow, I am called to forgive. I don't feel like I am released from my marriage, although I could have been. Yeah. But that moment that I realized that this is something that he doesn't want either. Mm-hmm. My husband has struggled for so many years with this in secret and with shame.
Yes.
If I'm going to choose to stay, which I did, I can't hold this over his head for the rest of his life. Yeah,
because it's not healthy for you or for him, and it's not how God wants us to live.
No, and if we are going to strive for a healthy relationship, which does include boundaries and all of these things, if we are going to strive for that together, then I have to be okay. The scar is there, it's not gone, but we can talk about it and we can move forward. Yeah. And I just have such a soft place in my heart because of that. And I know, while to date there has not been a relapse, to the best of my knowledge, I always put that caveat. I don't know that I never will. But to the best of my knowledge, there's not been a relapse, but I do know there has been struggle. And I do know there has been other things that have come up that my first reaction isn't anymore to just flip the tables and to get angry. It's what do we need to do? Me, but how, I know it's nothing I did. This is not me. This has nothing to do with me. What do you need? How can I support you? That's just how we have built such a beautiful recovery story.
He feels safe too.
Yeah. 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 And he has men, and he has.
And don't you think, after going through this, not that I would wish this on my worst enemy.
Right.
Your relationship is so much deeper than it would have ever been had you not experienced this.
Yeah.
I mean, we go to levels that I think people go to their graves and don't go to.
Yeah.
With each other and others.
Yeah. Agreed.
So it's rich.
Yes.
It really is. God has really turned it around.
Yeah. My husband never had. So he's had one childhood friend that he's known most of his life they still talk on their birthdays. But they don't really know much about each other. Mm-hmm. And my husband's almost 46. No, he is 46. And he doesn't really know him. And until he started walking through Pure Desire and walking through recovery groups and leading men, man, you go to a level with other men and as a woman with other women, you go to a level that most people are uncomfortable going to.
Most everybody, yeah. Nobody likes to see me come in at a regular Bible study because I just can't, you know? So, I mean, I don't believe they don't want to see me coming. But what I'm saying is I kind of rattle things a little bit. Not even on purpose, but I've just done this for so long.
Yeah.
And we do go deep, fast.
Yeah. My dad used to always say, the most real people you'll ever find is sitting in an AA meeting. Yeah. My dad is a recovering alcoholic, and so he found Jesus in AA. But yeah, I mean, the recovery people who have
Celebrate recovery. John used to say, this is more like church than church.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
so,
it is, where you are linking arms and you're messy. You're
messy
in the messy.
I don't know if you've seen, or anyone that's watching seen the Brene Brown, the little thing on empathy, but it's a little cartoon. You can Google it. Yeah. And there's this little creature down in this hole, just down. Yeah. And one sympathy walks by and looks down and goes, "Oh, hey, sorry to see you down there. You want a sandwich?" And then they keep going, And empathy climbs down there and sits.
It's with you.
I mean, we get in the mud or the dirt or whatever, and we sit with people. We do what we wish, at least I do what I wish someone had done with me.
Yeah.
I want to be that person that I didn't have actually.
Same.
I mean, the counselor was great, but I didn't have this level of witness for myself,
That empathetic witness, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you, if you would, to address the listeners. And this is kind of like twofold, because while we know statistically men struggle with this a lot more, and you and I are sitting here as the betrayed spouse. Mm-hmm. However, on both sides of this, there's an addict, there's an issue, and then there is the one affected by it. There's the betrayed. And so that could be a man or a woman on either side. But I would love for you to just speak a little bit to the listener who would find themselves in one of those places.
Yeah. Well, I think Satan uses shame and isolation. Yeah. Those are his two best tools.
Yeah.
Whether it's the addict or whether it's the betrayed spouse. We don't want people to know what's going on, and we're ashamed. We take on the shame too as the betrayed spouse. So community, you need people beside you. I think the biggest healing factor here besides the Lord is community. I can't stress that enough. You said this earlier, you really can't heal by yourself. And so find your community. And Betrayal and Beyond provides a lot of resources for good community. There are other programs. I'm not going to say we're the only one. But find your community. Find some safe people to talk to get around you, that won't gossip about you, that will love you no matter what they hear. I was so blessed. I had, maybe 3 friends from church. They loved John through it. One of them was mad at him, but she tried really hard to still love him, The others were close with both of us. But those people, and they know who they are, really brought us through. And, now we have these groups like I run that you bond into that community really fast. Once you start, women walk through that door scared to death, thinking they're the only one, or what am I going to have to share, or, what are people going to find out? And within 3 weeks, they're like, can't wait to come back, calling each other, meeting each other. It's great. I've got today one of the gals in my brand new group. We've met 5 times, starting a Secret Santa for us all, So but it's like there's hope and there's joy and there's sorrow and sadness, but the community brings a lot of, healthy things into this healing, broken thing that we're trying to do. But,
yeah. And do you have anything, I know you're not the addict, but you've worked so closely with, what would you tell, I know my husband has spoken to this before, but what would you tell a man or a woman that is like, I don't even know where to start? Like, they've gotten to the point where they hate their addiction enough, because that's finally where my husband had to get, is that it didn't matter if I was going to leave him, or it didn't matter if I was going to take the kids. It didn't matter what I was going to do. He got to the point where he was like, I can't do this.
Well, the things that for any of us, if we have this addiction or any addiction, is one, we need to find a program.
Yeah.
For an alcoholic, it's a 12-step. And for a sex addict, there's great 12 steps too. They're secular, but they provide accountability. They provide steps through that you have to do. So I would say, find a group, find some safe people, and most of the time, and I know that sometimes financially it's really hard, you need a counselor. That not just any counselor. You need a certified sexual addictions counselor, or there's another type of counselor that's called deceptive sexuality and trauma trained counselor, DSTT or CSAT. It's what you want to see if you're an addict. And then for us, if we try to find it, we can also find coaches, which are a little less expensive.
Yeah.
APSAT, which is Associated Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists. You don't have to remember that, but they specialize in dealing with betrayal trauma. And so you can get a counselor or coach. They're around. They're not as many. We've got them really full and busy. I have specific ones I refer to because, they're just so good. So they have waiting lists, but, we're trying to get more people. There's been women have come out of my groups that have actually gone into the APSAT and CSAT counseling.
Yeah.
And one of them's training to be a coach right now. She's co-leading with me. I pulled her out. She's been a friend of mine since our first recovery 17 years ago. And then she's been through a couple of my groups. And then I pulled her back in while she's training to be an APSAT coach.
So there's resources.
Oh my gosh, there are resources, but you got to kind of know someone who knows someone.
Yeah.
And if you have a website, you're more than welcome to put my number on it and name.
Yeah.
We're open books, my husband and I, and we try to think of ourselves as guides.
Yeah.
We can't take care of it all. We're not counselors.
Right.
But we can guide people where they need to find the resources.
Well, you have been such an incredible resource just for me, because women come to me all the time, and I come to you all the time with women.
I'm glad I can be. It just makes my heart happy.
Well, in the show notes, we will have Vicki's email address, and if anything in this episode struck you, where you just feel like you need more information, feel free to reach out to me at Stories Unveiled, or Vicki. Her email, like I said, will be in the description below. So thank you so much for being here, Vicki.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.